All right. I'm just going to get it far in here. Clearly, this is about staff development, or staff recruitment and professional development. But what I wanted to start out with is, so you want to work here, tell me why. That's probably the most commonly asked question that you ask in an interview at any time. Sometimes you get truthful answers, probably sometimes you don't. You probably get responses like, I just want to work with kids, I want to change the world, and probably the most truthful answer is, I need a job. So as you're sifting through hundreds of resumes at the beginning of the year or mid-year each time, you're trying to figure out what's the most important. Is education more important than experience, or is experience more important than education? And then you invite these people in for an interview, and you're supposed to decide within 30 minutes whether this person is worthy to work at one of your schools with your kids or not, right? So at LA, we believe that it doesn't have to be like that specifically. When we recruit staff, we recruit from a couple different places. The number one being college campuses, obviously putting ads in the education department and trying to get college students from there. Two is Craigslist. Most people don't think of Craigslist as a good place to probably look for staff, but we've had really good success there, especially when you're looking for someone like a coach or someone that's an expert in something, like an artist, a musician, something like that. Of course, you get the random people applying for jobs, and you're like, I don't even know what you do. You did something crazy before this. But probably the best is through word of mouth from our staff. Our staff, when they bring us a person, we already know that they've probably already explained to that person what this job is like and the expectations that we have. But needless to say, recruiting staff and hiring staff is really difficult. So like I talked to before, we don't believe that hiring staff has to be a 30-minute process. We do a couple different things. We usually start out with a phone interview, especially with the Craigslist folks, because they probably submitted applications to like 30 different places, and when you call them, they'd be like, who is this again? So we kind of got to get some information, really let them know that what they're applying for or what they're getting into. Our next phase then is a group interview. So we bring in about 5 to 10 candidates into a group interview with a group of our site mentors, which are our full-time site staff in our organization. And they do a series of interactive activities, getting people out of the box, seeing who's willing to get kind of wild, like the first time they're in front of a group, seeing who's more laid back. And then from there, those people recruit from that group of 10 who they think could fit at their site. And then they take those people and do a one-on-one at the site level at a different time. Those interviews are really trying to see where their experience is at, what their education is, what they're passionate about, why they're really here, get the real answer, hopefully, in that situation. And then if you're lucky enough to work from one of our older campuses, our high school campuses, we're working with older youth, you're probably going to have to do a student interview. And that's really where the rubber meets the road. If our kids say that you are not fit for this site, you are not going to have a chance to work with us. But that's typically with older youth. Obviously, you're not going to have elementary kids interviewing staff necessarily. But really, with all these things, it's still hit or miss. You really don't know who you're hiring when you bring them in until you get them into kind of like a training scenario. So we have a 90-day trial period past the hiring process, and that's really where we get to see where people are at in that situation. That includes obviously working at the site level, a lot of professional development, evaluation, and observation. But the majority of that is professional development. So clearly, professional development is us giving tools to our employees, because if we don't give them the right tools, whether we think they're a good or bad employee right off the bat, there's no chance of them succeeding in the classroom, and we're not going to have the outcomes with kids that we think they should have. So that's what we're about. When we're talking about training in general, I was trying to think about this, and this is a really broad topic, and I was like, what's something inspirational that I can say to everyone? And I really couldn't think of anything. But as I thought through it more, I really thought that what is inspirational to me about training is when I see a program leader that's taken a workshop that we've done and really put it to use in the classroom. And and you really know a great staff member is when you see them doing it, and then they come to you afterwards and they give you feedback. They tell you what was great about that training and what worked in the classroom and what needs to be improved. And that's a really special kind of employee that you have there. So as we're getting into training, we kind of focus on two major parts of training in LA. And one is kind of the inspirational motivational training, which is the why we're here. And one is the more site-based programmatic training, which is how. The motivational training really is something that we don't do quite as often, maybe a couple times a year when people really need to be rejuvenated. When you need somebody to tell you that you're making a difference at the site, that you're changing the lives of kids, we need that. But we don't need it too often, and that tends to be imbalanced often. And then when we really go into the site-based programmatic training, we kind of break that into two pieces. One being compliance and operation, and the other being really what's going on in the classroom itself. Obviously, compliance and operation is very straightforward. You're really learning the policies and procedures of the site, employee handbook, HR law, things like that, which can tend to get a little bit bland, and we'll follow up with a little bit of that later. But the more complex piece is really the classroom instructional piece. And we really try to give our staff some concrete instructional strategies to use, but we also really try to use professional development as a time for them to communicate with one another, share best practices, share struggles, share ideas, but that is definitely the most complex piece to what we do. So through this, we haven't always done professional development the way we're doing it now. And we've had a couple struggles primarily. One is that we've tended to spend too much time on the motivational and inspirational speeches. So we're talking more about why than the how. So everybody's like jazzed up, woo, save the world. But how do I do it? So we've fallen into that pit a couple times. We also have had trainings that have been very stagnant and non-interactive, and really kind of doing the same trainings over and over and over, even when the populations of people are changing. We've had people leading sessions that probably weren't considered experts in the topic they were talking about, which takes away all credibility in whatever subject matter they're speaking on. And lastly, we've had a habit of not tailoring our trainings to the people in the room, meaning that basically we will have everyone in the same room. We'll have our full-time staff, we'll have our part-time staff, our new staff, our old staff, our veteran staff, all in the same room going through the same trainings. And that's not what you need to be doing. It loses its purpose. So we've combated this in a couple different ways. Number one, we began to do program leader run trainings. And those are like our true experts in the field. And those staff members are definitely veterans. They've been in the program for at least 3 years and have shown that they can lead a presentation. So we kind of do a trainer of the trainer with them, and that they can show their expertise and people really absorb that information. The next is really bringing an expert. There's just some topics that you have to bring somebody else in to do, whether that's coaching or whether that's HR law or something like that. And I know we struggled this for a long time with just our ego of thinking we can do all these trainings ourselves. When it came to reality, is that we can't. We got to bring in other people to help us. Committees. We brought in committees to really focus on our initiatives and the pillars in LA. These committees are made up of a variety of different people, from program leaders all the way up to program directors like myself, and they serve a variety of functions. We also realize that not everybody is a presenter, and that's an important thing to know, that you can have people as part of a committee that do research, that put together the PowerPoint presentation, that put together the activities themselves, and then you have the presenters. And those are all important pieces to having in this committee. Next, we do regional trainings. And regional trainings are a little bit more specific. It's almost a custom-tailored training to what you feel like the needs are in your region. For example, my region, we're primarily high school. We have been in the past, but this year we're K-12. We had to figure out what we needed to do to really get our region on the same page, and we decided to do youth development, which transcends all grade levels. Youth development theory does. So with that, we do a quarterly training on Saturdays, and Cindy leads those. The last couple things, everybody does post surveys, but we do post surveys a little bit differently, and I think it's a really good strategy. Our colleague came up with this. And really what we do is we incentivize them not doing the post survey right when they finish the training, because we were getting no data from that. So we incentivize them taking the survey home and filling it out and bringing it either a couple days later or the next day, so we have some real information to go off of when we're redesigning our trainings. And lastly, having ongoing and follow-up trainings to the trainings that we've already done are really, really important. So as I kind of wrap things up, I want you to think about a couple things when you're designing professional development at your sites. And these are things that I've seen people and us make mistakes when. And really, when we're talking about compliance and operations, it does not have to be boring. I've heard many times a person getting ready to do an operational training or something like that, and they will intro the training by saying, get ready to sit for 3 hours, guys. It's going to be boring. I need you to stay awake and stay off your cell phone. That's the intro. What we have to do with trainings like this is really loop people in emotionally so they really understand the purpose of that training. For example, if I was to do emergency procedures training, I would start with a story. And I tell people this story all the time. When I first started at Bret Harte Middle School in South Central Los Angeles in 2003 as a program leader, those of you that know South Central LA and its reputation, I really didn't have a ton of training. I probably had 2 hours of training before I started. And I was hired as a coach. And I was coaching football and soccer at the time. And if you've been in LA at the end of the summer, it's beautiful. Like if at the end of the day the sun sets, I don't know if it has to do with the smog or what it is, you got the Santa Anas blowing in, warm wind, whatever. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm out there coaching, new formations, running plays, and I'm thinking to myself, I cannot believe I'm out here getting paid. Like, this is amazing. My kids are amazing, the program's amazing. Not 20 seconds after that, I see some guys running. I'm like, why are they running over there? About 10 seconds after that, I hear screeching tires, and their Jeep comes around the corner with a guy sitting out the window shooting an automatic rifle at the guys running. And they're shooting it across the blacktop where my kids are playing. And I have never gone through an operations training or emergency procedure training. I don't really know what to do. Of course, the kids know what to do. They hit the deck. But in my mind, I'm going like, do I tell them to run? Do I tell them to lay down? And I don't really, and so what I tell people is, I don't want you to find yourself in the same situation as that. So pay attention, please. Secondly, youth development is the foundation for all professional development. Your staff has to know how to articulate or understand and intentionally teach the lesson behind the lesson. I always relate this back to sports because that's one of my passions. And the things I took from sports weren't just learning how to shoot a basketball or kick a soccer ball or catch the football. It was the leadership. It was the teamwork. It was the unity. And those are the things that we need to have in order to take kids into adulthood. And they're really important. And so that has to be the foundation of all professional development that you do. And lastly, training is always evolving. If you're doing the same trainings over and over for the same people or different people, you are going to struggle. You have to be willing to tinker with everything that you're doing. You have to be willing to reevaluate. You have to be willing to take negative feedback and do something with that. And that's really important. So thank you.
My name is Tyrone. I'm with the After School All-Stars in Los Angeles. I'm a program director there, and I've been with the organization for 11 years. Today I came to talk about professional development and staff recruitment. And the main points for the talk today were really around staff recruitment in terms of how hard it is really to get great staff. And really what it comes down to is you can have as many different interviews and as many different recruitment strategies as possible, but it's still, you never really can understand the integrity and the character of a staff member just from an interview. And so we kind of focus on that, and really we focus on the first 90 days and what a staff goes through. And really it's a lot of observation, professional development, and they're in the classroom for the first time. And that's where you really get to see the character and integrity and work ethic of an employee. But the biggest part of that is professional development. It probably is 75% of that time is spent doing that. And that's really important. You don't want to send a program leader into a classroom with no tools. If they go in with no tools, their chance of success is decreased. Thus, the outcomes we're trying to get with kids is decreased. So we talked about the challenges we've had in Los Angeles around professional development. Some of those being really having some stagnant professional development, not really evolving and making changes around that. Bringing in different people into our professional development instead of just depending on us to be the expert and depending on us to do every type of training and bringing in other people. And lastly, really understanding that training is like an ever-evolving thing. It's never stagnant. You're always having to tinker and adjust things to make it better, to really adapt that to the people that you're training, the different groups, whether that's an entry-level staff person, a veteran, a full-time person, all those things. And really lastly, I talked about the design of professional development and the things that you have to do. And when we talk about compliance training, which tends to be very boring, very procedural, that you really have to link that to the emotions of staff. I told the story about when I first started as a program leader at Bret Harte Middle School in South Central LA, and I was coaching a football team at the time, and there was a drive-by on campus, and they were shooting bullets across the blacktop, and I hadn't had enough training. I didn't really know what to do in that moment, so I said, get down, but I didn't know if that was the real procedure. But that's how you link in people to that training. Like, this can happen at any one of your campuses. The other one being youth development, and that being the foundation of all programming and all professional development, and really making sure that staff understand the lesson behind the lesson. So it's not just about shooting the basketball or throwing the football, that it's really about the teamwork that they're learning, the sportsmanship they're learning, how to be in a collaborative environment with other people, those pieces. And that's kind of was the basis of what I talked about today. Sure, I mean, at the lowest level, the staff is coming in on time. And then what does their preparation look like each day? And what are they like in the classroom? You really want to see them within that 90 days taking the workshops that you facilitated or that the professional development team has facilitated and really using them in the classroom structure. And then if they're a really high level employee, you really see them take those trainings and then they come back to you and say, hey, this is what worked, this is what didn't, let's tweak this when you train the next group. And that's really what you're looking for there. I'm originally from Spokane, Washington. I moved to LA 12 years ago. And I worked in after school in Washington. I kind of just moved down to LA just to move, like literally. There was no major reason. And I knew I kind of wanted to get back into that field. And I actually had a job offer to be Carlos Santini's personal assistant at that time. And when I got there, they realized I had some after school experience. So they sent me out to Bret Harte Middle School in South LA. And I just kind of started thinking that it would be just kind of a stepping stone to somewhere else. And then I ended up being here 11 years later. Through ASAS, I've really gotten to see lives of students change. And there's a ton of different examples of that, throughout our organization. But being change agents and really understanding that these types of programming are necessary, and we get to hit a lot of places that the school day is unable to hit in terms of like social development and things like that. And it's really important to me. And just, I know how I was raised. And I feel like there's a lot of kids that don't have that same kind of support and structure. And that's really important to me that we provide that and be like the champion for those kids all the time. I talk about, and I've said this in trainings before, when I was a site coordinator at Bret Harte Middle School, this is probably 6-7 years ago, I can remember being there in the summer and just being on the blacktop, and like the Santa Ana winds were like blowing, it was warm, and the way the sun was setting, and I'm just like watching kids play and like do things and just being like, does it get much better than this? Like, you're in a place you love, you have, even though you're in the middle of this like, neighborhood that's like, gang riddled and crime and all kinds of things happening there, like this is like the one sanctuary here. And I just remember like literally walking through that blacktop and being like, this is a great lifestyle and this is a great place to be like right now. I don't know if people who come to work here, they come to work here because you hope that they come here because they love kids, because they want to change the world, they want to better their communities. But they need to know that this is a place where you can have a career. And I don't think people think like that. They think it really is truly a stepping stone to go somewhere else. But if you're really passionate about this, you could do this your entire life and move up in an organization or work in a couple different organizations and do what you love forever and provide amazing opportunities at all different levels of an organization. I manage my sites a little bit differently probably than a lot of people do. If my staff feels like something is going to work or something's new and something's edgy and they want to try it, I'm going to let them try it. As long as they're not breaking the law or endangering kids, I'm going to let them do that. And even if they fail and we can adjust or whatever, but I think letting them have that autonomy and that kind of creative power to do whatever they think is going to be the best for those kids that day, or they're listening to an idea from a kid, this kid has some out-of-the-box idea, and we're like, okay, let's try it. Like I said, as long as they're not breaking the law and someone's not going to get hurt, I'm going to let you try it out. And I think that's important for staff to feel like somebody listens to them and listens to what they think is important and what their students think is important. I think we have a real strength around professional development. It's taken us a lot of years to get where we're at right now, but that's one major strength. And I think we have a drive to be the best, if not in just LA, in the state of California, or the nation. And I feel like even that's part of the reason I've stayed with After School All Stars Los Angeles has been because I know we're the best. And if I go somewhere else, we're not going to be the best. And that's one of the most important things to me. The best thing about ASAS is the people who work there and their passion for changing kids' lives and bringing opportunities to kids who don't get the opportunities that they should.